All right, everybody, welcome back to the Louder Now podcast. This is episode number 130. Guys, I am so excited for this episode, and I've probably said that before because I'm really grateful for the opportunity to always get to talk with people. So, I got to hang out with my friend Benji the end of August. He came to visit me in Laverne, which is about 9.5 hours ish away from where he lives now in Reading. And Benji knows this, and we talked about this, that basically I met him October of 2013, which means that we're coming up on knowing each other for almost 10 years. So much to say. Benji had a kind of personal tragedy last year, and I wanted to talk about that because it's a real thing, and talking about grief and loss, and also because he's such a good brother to me, and I would love to have more people on the podcast that are near and dear to my heart, in terms of, people that I have spent a lot of time around, and some of those people have already been on the podcast too. And so anyway, I'm just doing a long intro because I love Benji, and I'm so grateful we got to talk. And here is my conversation with Benji Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And through the text thread of everybody texting each other,
Yeah.
I think that's how you guys found out about it.
Yeah.
So I'm on
Yeah.
like the third day of being in a coma. People are coming in and out. My nephew was probably only maybe 6 months old at the time, and
Yeah.
my friend Nick, who was at Fuller, was actually the first person to come to the hospital, like in the
Wow.
middle of
Yeah.
the night to be with my
Yeah.
mom, which is I found all this stuff out later. So anyway,
Wow.
the
Yeah.
connection was
Yeah.
you hear about this, you don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
You guys just find out, hey, there's this guy who used to be at IHOP and he's in a coma.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like when you heard about that? And it was the morning, right? It was like a Thursday morning.
Yeah. It was Thursday morning at like 8 o'clock during prayer room.
Right.
So man,
If you remember, yeah.
yeah,
What that was
no,
like.
I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
like it was yesterday for sure,
yeah.
man.
Awesome.
It's crazy that it's been that long. But yeah, so we're in this encounter discipleship school, a bunch of kids like 18 to 26 whatever year olds, and I'm 23, and I'm just wanting to be like on fire for the Lord, and I'm believing for God to do things that I've never believed God to do things before. You know what I mean? Um, and it was just something. It was something like that was just like when we heard about it, when Katie came over and said, we were in the prayer room. It was probably like not right at 8 o'clock in the morning, but it's probably like 8:15, 8:30. Um, but she came and like kind of stopped prayer room just to kind of like come up and talk and everything. And it's just like, hey, I just got word. Our friend Jared uh is, overdosed, is in the hospital now, and is in a coma, and he hasn't woken up for like 2 or 3 days, and he just nothing. And the doctors say if he would ever wake up, he would have brain damage. He would have like
Right.
like all these things that come.
Possible brain damage
Yeah,
and memory loss. Right.
yeah, possible, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so all of the kids, without even a doubt, of just like we had certain like, well, prayer room is, IHOP prayer room and stuff, the Harp and Bowl. um but like we just all kind of gathered together, and we just all came together in the corner. I remember the corner of the left side of New Life Community Church in Pomona.
Mhm.
And we all were like, there was this thing of like, I remember Sean Tavicoli, was there as
Oh,
well.
wow. No
Yeah,
way. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I met him.
I think we were starting up a new thing called, I forget what it was called. It was some kind of like fire something, but it was like 30 minutes of just like gorok, in your spiritual language, and you just like bring the presence, and so that's what we were doing. And
Okay.
so these kids we were just all huddled in this circle, and we were praying, and people were just, it was rapid fire prayer around the circle. We just kept on, like, I remember Kat,
Oh,
she
yeah.
was
Oh,
yeah,
I miss these
she
people now. Oh,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
she had she had said something about like, Lord, we just thank you for Jared, like,
Yeah,
not having any brain damage or
right,
anything like that. And
right.
that was a lot of our prayers, but for some reason it was like, it was the authority or something that she had, that she just like spoke. And it was like all
Yeah,
of us, that we were, if we weren't praying in our English tongue, we were praying in our native tongue. We were
right,
praying in our spiritual language,
right.
and it just was like, we all just came together, and we were like, no, this is like Satan. This is why we're here. This is what we're here for. This is what we're here to use our authority, our new like authority that we've learned, that we can actually step into, that the authority that we have from Jesus. And so it was something that we just all participated in. And
Yeah,
then while we were praying as well, um rapid fire prayer here and there, and then you know and then prayer room ends at 10 o'clock.
right.
So we were praying for that long, and then we also went into, like, it was done, but the spirit was going and Jesus was moving, and just he was just filling the room of like anticipation and
Right.
encouragement, encouraging our hearts. So we went into the other room, where like the cafeteria kind of thing.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
would eat, we eat food, we'd talk about Jesus in that room. um and we went into a bigger circle. So like, instead of huddling, we came out,
yeah.
and we were in a bigger circle, and there was probably a good 25 to 30 of us in that circle,
Wow.
and still, like, just praying and declaring and asking the Lord to just to wake you up, wake you up, wake you up. And it was an amazing, like, time. We all felt like, no, he's gonna wake up, dude. I know this for a fact. Like, he's going to wake up, and he's not just gonna wake up, but he's not gonna have anything like negative towards this. Like, this isn't going to impact the way that he's now going to think, the way that he's now going to live his life.
Yeah,
He's not going to have any repercussions with that, like, mentally,
yeah,
in that. um and so it was great. It was great.
yeah. And then what had happened was, so that was 8 a.m. to 12, and then
Hmm.
it was a few hours later, a couple hours later that afternoon,
Yeah,
I ended
yeah,
up
I think it was
waking up.
like 3 o'clock or
Yeah,
something.
I woke up from the
Yeah.
coma, and the thing was, my friends who had flown in from Kansas City, we had done a ministry trip in 2011. So
Hmm.
I met Craig and Billy, and I think at the time Rick Fry, right there
Uh-huh.
in Cafe
Yeah.
Vita. And all I remember from Rick Fry was his like bending his arms weird and stuff. And then I remember
Yeah,
the
yeah.
pig roaster out in like the parking lot.
Hmm.
And I remember Craig just wearing like, basketball shorts, talking about basketball.
Yeah.
Um, and because I remember Dave Sliker preached, and it was like a Wednesday night.
Oh, right.
And
Yeah. Yep.
this was before Encounter. And then I think,
Before your encounter. Yeah.
oh, well,
Yeah. Before
before
you.
Encounter started, I think. So, because this was 2011.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was like right
Okay.
when Craig's daughter was doing like the one thing intern. Anyway, so
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
bits and pieces of things, and then like Richie Clark was doing worship, and I think probably people that
yeah.
like were doing worship at New Life were
Mhm.
also on the stage, and I just
Yeah.
remember being like, dang, this place is packed, man. This is like a Wednesday, you know. I remember talking about that with Billy years later. But yeah, they were they came up to New Life and saw that Encounter was going. They, you know, they said hi to Craig, and they went to Donut Man and, you know, did their fun things. And then when I had woken up in the coma and then I found out that they were there. So, right, I wake up, no brain damage, no memory loss. Now I'm seeing all these people like, whoa, my nephew's here, my sister, all these people are here. A lot of friends through my sister and brother-in-law. They were at Biola at the time and all this stuff. And so then I'm like, whoa, Zach's here, Dave's here, Stuart's here, Kyle's, you know. And then that's when they were like, hey, man, like, we were just at Craig's church and we saw all these young people doing this internship thing, doing this prayer thing. Hey, whenever you know, do what the doctors say, but like no rush, like maybe this could be a good place for you to check out. So long story short, I spent 5 months in the hospital. And then by the grace of God, I started, you know, getting better kind of pretty quickly. And I talked to Craig on the phone, like when I was in the hospital, probably maybe at least once, maybe twice. August. And then he was like, oh, well, you know, the semester's starting soon. And I didn't really know for sure when I was going to get out. So I didn't get out until October. I got out October 9th, 2013. It was like a Thursday or a Tuesday or something.
Something like that.
And then that, right when I get out, I get my phone, I get settled. I was living in this kind of boarding care place in Anaheim. I mean, I called Craig and he's like, hey, do you want to come this weekend? We're doing like a Charles Craft, like, deliverance thing, right? And so I don't have a car. I had a situation with things where I couldn't drive for a year and all this stuff. That's just part of the whatever. And so I was like, well, I don't have a car. I'm in Anaheim, which is only, you know, like 35 minutes from where you guys are at. So I was like, well, let me ask this place if they'll let me go. So they say I can go for the weekend, you know, just got to take my meds with me. And then you and Daniel Ziegler picked
I was
me
gonna
up,
say that,
right? And that's when, and I knew you guys
in his truck.
That's when we met, I met Amy as well. And we all went to Tijuana Tacos that night. Like South Campus was also under construction. So like Craig was like, oh, we're remodeling all of the stuff in here. And I remember, like, you know, sleeping in the bunk beds with you guys or whatever. And like, I know, here we are almost 10 years later. And then, and then I did Encounter, or I moved up there to do Encounter. Then like 3 months later, the rest is history, I guess, right?
Oh man, yeah.
But it's cool to tell the
Been a
story.
long time.
It's cool to get your perspective, because I think in terms of what's been talked about a lot on here, which is like, oh, what are the things that help you? When I used to work with NAMI, we said community was really a big thing. And it's kind of like, it's still true. It's always evolving and changing how, in terms of what it looks like. And I just got to hang out with you a few weeks ago because you came down to visit.
It was awesome.
So obviously a lot has happened in the last 10 years, but it's like the things that were, so the first thing that stood out was community, right? And the second, I think, was sort of the mixture of taking kind of all of the charismatic stuff of how I was raised, and then the house of prayer. And by charismatic, I mean, you know, the prayer part, the intercession stuff, the worship stuff, the praying in tongues, and then kind of the like hunger for like miracles and healings. And then taking that and kind of meshing it with Pastor Craig's sort of and Billy's sort of what people would call like the inner healing kind of movement, or like the people who are like, okay, we have these gifts and we have these expressions of the spirit. We don't want to lose that. But then we also have like this internal world, which kind of crosses over with a lot of mental health stuff, which is abuse or trauma or unforgiveness.
Yeah.
kind of done to you by maybe your parents or other people, and it's like you can skip over that and you can kind of just jump, or you can try to skip over it.
Yeah.
And kind of jump
Very.
in, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, because
Mhm.
you're a
Yep.
talented worship leader, musician,
Mhm.
so you could just
Yep.
jump on stage and you could kind of operate in your gift, but
Yeah.
then you have this whole inside world. So I'm not saying that my time at IHOP was like we neglected all of that stuff,
Yeah.
but it
No.
was easy to kind of skip over. And also, I was
Yeah.
young too,
Yeah.
and I remember, to kind of the connection for me was I read Wild at Heart right when I was an intern at the
It's
House
a
of
good book.
Praise. It's like fall. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's September 2022, so September 2004
Oh
is
wow.
when
Yeah.
I went to Kansas City. So it's like, wow,
Wow.
18 years later, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
I remember reading Wild at Heart, and he talked about the whole like fatherhood thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, oh man, I think I have a father. You know, I was like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I don't like my dad. You know, and I
Yeah.
brought that up on this podcast too, because our sometimes it's like one theory is like things are genetic, right? And they
Yeah.
get passed down. And so anyway, to
Yeah.
come full circle 10 years later to be an encounter from the time I started Kansas City was like 10 years later almost. So for
Yeah.
Craig to be bringing
Yeah.
it up then after all the struggle. So it was an interesting season, those few years being there, of sort of this merging of like the Sunday night charismatic stuff that we did, the prayer
Mm-hmm.
room, and then Cody's house
Yeah.
on Mondays, getting to
Oh
preach.
man.
He let me preach on a
Yeah.
Sunday night, which was also in September as well.
Yeah.
It was, you got to preach too
Yeah.
your last Sunday
Mm-hmm.
as well. That was awesome. But like
Yeah.
all of the kind of charismatic stuff was there, and then
Mm-hmm.
sort of this other message of like learning how to, like, I guess, be open to healing,
Mm-hmm.
like in the
Yeah.
internal world. And
Yeah.
so now here we are. um let's see, when did we both kind of left at the same time? Well, I kind of left after you left, so you
Hmm.
left May 2016.
Yeah. May 2016.
So what was the transition away from like the years at New Life, because you were there for like 4 years, right?
Yeah. I was there for
Yeah.
4 years. Yeah.
So what was
Almost completely, like a full 4 years, because
yeah,
July 28th to May
right, yeah, that's almost 4 years.
2016. So it's, May, June, yeah, almost.
But yeah, you kind of like, you remember, because I remember what happened. We went to Oregon together
Mm-hmm.
for Christmas,
Yep. Yeah.
or right after Christmas.
Yeah.
And it was you and me and Amy Hansen
Yep.
and
Yep.
Nicole for a little bit, and
That
then
was
2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Yep. 2015.
And
Yep.
it was right before I started working for Clint, and then I didn't realize I was jumping into like this crazy job of
Yeah.
traveling. But
Yeah.
we went to see Star Wars with
Yep.
Daniel Siegler, our buddy,
Yep.
and
Yep.
which was also hard to wait to see it with him. So,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
when you want to see stuff, like you're like, get
Yeah.
to the
Right.
showing right away, right away. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, you were like, uh, well, I don't know. Was Oregon on your mind before that, or is it really that? I felt like that trip kind of put it in your mind that you were like, oh, it'd be cool to live up here or whatever.
Yeah, it was mostly mostly it was because my relationship with Daniel.
Right.
Because his grandpa was really sick and
Oh, that's
dying.
right. Okay.
So that's why he even like brought Oregon up, and that he was moving away,
Oh, that's
moving up
right. He had
north.
moved like the summer
Yeah.
before we went. So
Hmm.
he had been
In
up
like
there.
August, I think. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
I did one more semester of Encounter.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, so mine and Daniel Ziegler's relationship was very, very, like, he was my brother. He is my brother. Um, and so it was just like, it was a very it was a very like, okay, Lord, what is do you want me to move, or like, and he was basically like, yeah, if you wanna go, like you can. Because mine and his relationship was very much like um encouraging one another, and we were super close. And I didn't know it at the time, but because I did one more semester of encounter, I so the first like for the first like 2.5 3 years, I think, of encounter, I didn't pay anything. For the first semester I did, but I didn't pay anything. So I had like all this debt and everything from doing encounter every
Mhm.
semester, you know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
So I had this money that I needed to pay back. So I started working for the church. I started doing janitorial work. I just started, uh, you know, doing the working with the kids. And so I was actually a worship, the kids worship pastor for a little bit up in King's Kids. So that was all that money was towards my debt, or my my bills
Right.
and stuff for school. Um, and so I didn't know it at the time, but I just had this like, the Lord put this like faith in me, that like this knowing faith that all my bills were going to be paid for by this next semester. So the Lord was already transitioning me into um, maybe moving to Oregon.
Right.
So basically, he moves, and I'm like, man, I'm struggling kind of. I'm like, man, I want to be with him. I want to
Right.
be near him, you know? Um, and so it was like, it was at this, I forget his name. It was a healing conference. Um, and I was in the healing conference. I wasn't even in the room where the minister was. I was in the side room.
Oh, the Randy Clark thing.
Randy Clark. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Randy Clark.
Yeah,
So
that was epic. 'Cause the first night was
oh
Sean
man.
Boltz. Well, he filled in
Yeah. Oh, I
last
remember
week.
that. Yeah.
And
Yep.
I remember that because I was down in the sound booth with like Roisin, and like
Hmm.
that was when the prophetic word happened to the Bates, and I was there. And I
Yeah.
just talked to them
Yeah.
about that when I saw them at Mike's party. Anyway, so but
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you were, yeah, because that happened right after we did the trip,
Yeah, I think so.
right? It was
Yep.
right at the beginning
Yep.
of 2016 there. So yeah.
Yeah. So I was really like, I didn't want to make a big like wrong move, you know. This was me growing up with the Lord, was like, you just tell me what to do and show me what I need to do, and I'll do it. And that's what I've just been doing for so long. And so um when I was in the overflow room, uh, watching him on the screen and whatnot, praying and reading my journal and writing in my journal. And then we went into a time, it was the latter half, the very, very like last point of the whole like conference. And I'm I'm worshiping with my hands raised and stuff. And then I'm just like kind of like peaceful, with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
And then I fall, and I fall down, and no one pushed me, no one was around me or anything like that. So I fall down, and then I wake up, and I sit on my chair, and I'm like, okay, Lord, what do you, so he says, take out your pen, and I start to write, and he says, not yet. And I say, okay. So then he says, okay, now. So then he writes me this like, hi Benjamin, I love you so much, like he's encouraging my heart,
Mhm.
um and long story short, basically he says, if you want to go to Oregon, if you want to move, you can, because I live in you, right? I
Mhm.
live in you,
Yeah.
and you've been following me faithfully for the last 4 years. You've learned a lot about me, a lot about who you are. If you want to go, you can. So that was the first big decision that I've ever made in my whole entire life. That was just like, Lord,
Yeah.
I don't want to make it wrong, and he's like, dude, just make the decision, So anyways, I move up there,
Mhm.
and yeah, it's just like trust in the Lord and
Yeah,
have, you know what I mean, and making those big decisions.
for sure.
And so, and I think maybe going up there like in December really helped a little
Right.
bit of like
Yeah.
trying to figure out like, hey, let's just try to see if this is like a good thing or whatever,
Yeah. No, that was a fun trip. And then I remember you and I did that short San Francisco trip too.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right
yep.
before I started working for Clint. And
Hmm.
it's crazy to think that that was like 6-7 years ago now,
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, well,
yeah.
I remember um around that time too, the beginning of the year,
Hmm.
I felt transition for myself as well, right? And I said sometimes it's
Hmm.
like, um, you know, does God always prompt us or tell us
Mm.
change is about to happen?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know.
Not
I mean,
always.
this is
Not
different for
always.
everybody, right? But I did
Yeah.
feel kind of this, and I remember writing it down as I kind of have always been sort of a journaler, or we're always
Yeah.
writing things down. That's
Hmm.
definitely been a thing, and
Yeah.
probably because I've aspired to write. But at least I know I'm like, my mom's kind of like that. Like she has like dates and words and stuff. But
Yeah.
I remember writing. I remember feeling a sense of like new life um, was not going to be like a permanent place,
Hmm.
and I
Yeah.
had
Training ground.
yeah, I'd seen it as a and I think it's kind of like the disciples, right? Like they're with Jesus and then
Hmm.
trying to kind of figure a lot of things out, like in the moment. And we know that there's a lot of things that were happened that weren't written down, right?
Hmm.
So, but from what
Yeah.
we can see in like the Gospels, right? It's like, oh
Hmm.
wow, there's kind of a lot of confusion, right? Like, oh wait, you're gonna
Yeah.
die on the cross, right? Why do you keep talking about that? And
Yeah.
then it's like, then it happens, right? And then he
Yeah.
leaves, and then they look back and go, oh, well, that makes sense now, like kind of in hindsight, right? So
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
kind of like that. Sometimes I'm like, I think I understand better the stuff that happened in those years better now, being
Hmm.
years later, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh wow, and those messages and the things that we experienced, the healing stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's like
Yeah.
that's like even more relevant now than it was even in the moment. If
Yeah.
that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Like it was
Yeah.
needed then, and
Yeah.
it's like still needed now.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
the idea of you know forgiving people and forgiving your parents and working through trauma and
Hmm.
working through these things. It's like um you know we're always going to be working on that stuff too.
Yeah.
So here we are now,
Yeah.
kind of years later, right? And like
Hmm.
we're still friends, and we're
Hmm.
living in different places now. Well,
Yeah.
you're back in California, but you're
Yeah.
10 hours away from me, 9 hours away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Still a big drive, but
yeah, and so I know that I just saw you, so we got to catch up, and that's also when I said, "Oh, you should be on the podcast. That'd be fun."
yeah.
But
Yeah.
so the thing that happened with your brother
Hmm.
was almost a year ago, right?
Yeah, it was October 25th of
Okay.
last year.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
almost, yeah.
Yeah,
So talk to
almost
us
a year
about
ago.
that. Like what happened. I know uh you have 6 people total, right? In your
Yeah. Yeah, five brothers and sisters and then, mom and dad.
right. Okay, so
But
seven.
yeah.
Seven.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
7 now. Yeah.
yeah, so what tell the story. I know it's kind of a hard story to tell probably, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you what happened with your brother, and I don't think I did I ever meet him.
I don't think you
Maybe
met
not.
Daniel. No.
Okay, I've met some of your
Yeah.
family from like
Yeah.
coming to New Life before or something.
Hmm.
So,
Let me hold on really quick. I'm gonna maybe not. For yeah, purposes only. I we lived in Oregon. Me and my wife, Jannie Davis.
Okay.
You know her.
You got married March
Yeah,
2018.
I
You didn't
got
say
married
that. So
March
you are
2018. Yes,
okay.
I am married.
There you go. You and
So
Ziegler both. I'm
yeah.
still I'm still lagging behind pretty much
Yeah.
all my friends.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, right.
except for the single ones that I have now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, and Daniel's having kids too. He just had a
Yeah,
second.
he just had a boy, so a little
Yeah,
boy.
so
So
that's amazing. So I texted him
yeah.
that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Um we had moved to Missouri September of last year.
okay,
September 1st, I think, of last
okay.
year.
So 2020, right?
Yeah, 2021. Um and yeah, we did it came out of nowhere. Um I still remember the call that my parents gave us that night. It was 9 o'clock or 9, somewhere around there, 9:05, uh, that Daniel had passed away.
Okay.
Um, he got hit by a truck, a truck and trailer,
Okay.
and
How old was he at that time?
he was 27. He would have been 28 on the 29th of this month.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
It's very, very weird. Um, still a very weird feeling.
Yeah.
Um, when when we heard, I was working with the tree service in Missouri, um, and I gave them the news, and I didn't know what to do. I just knew I had to be with my family. And so they were gracious enough to give me that time off.
Mhm.
And they were like, do whatever you need, like be like however long you need to go down there. So we had all got together. My brother in Iowa, he drove down. Janie and I drove down from Missouri, or no, actually we flew. Sorry. It was a big it's a big 2,000 miles, but we flew, and we got there, within a couple hours, and we were there for the weekend. And it was really, really hard, and it still is really hard. The wound is a little bit softer, or like calloused over, like just like if you get cut, um, it just was. I've struggled a lot. This last year, I believe I went into a little depression myself. Um, how do you deal with something like that,
Yeah.
um, especially, you around when you're around friends and people that they know, or family members that they know. um, it's different when you hear that they've passed on or they've died.
Mhm.
um and it's a lot different than when you're actually like your sibling, like your brother or your sister passed away unexpectedly, especially. um and so we had like a little interview thing for law purposes, attorney and stuff, and they put like a little video, a video thing together for us. um it has been it's been weird because I thought that we were invincible, that I was invincible, and my parents and my family was invincible. And the whole, you grow up hearing and you learn, like, from the Bible, that like tomorrow is not promised. And it doesn't really actually say tomorrow's not promised, but he says that tomorrow, or don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow worries about itself. Like, do the birds of the air worry? And basically don't worry, but like live in the present.
Yeah.
And so like that whole thing, that's really a huge reason why we're in California now.
Because you're
Some
about a few hours from your family, right?
Yeah, yeah. We're about right smack dab. Redding, California is right in the middle of basically her parents that live in Oregon, and then my parents that live in Merced or Cathy's Valley, like, south from us.
Okay.
So it's like it's right in the middle. So that's a really big. We were actually living or looking to Idaho, but some of our friends were like, hey, we're getting, like, we feel the transition. um what about Redding? Do you want to, we'll buy a house. They have like 4 kids. We'll buy a house. We'll get a little ma and pa apartment or whatever, and then you guys can live there. What do you think? We're like, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
awesome. So then it just came down to, we moved here before because we were wanting to, we just felt that transitioning out, uh and so then we were like, yeah, California, here we come.
Yeah.
So is yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's good, man. I was just letting
Yeah.
you share. I mean, I've talked about grief on here with some people,
Yeah.
done some couple episodes on grief specifically.
Yeah.
And me personally, um, my dad's dad died in 2002. I was like 17, and my grandma passed away like in 2018.
Yeah.
And so I was, I wasn't super close with both of them. I mean, definitely used to talk on the phone with my grandma like maybe once a month or something, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's not like we had no relationship, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like, when we were little kids, my parents were both flight attendants, we stayed with them. So
Yeah.
that's probably when I was in 8th grade, there was a girl who had died. It was a really sad situation, kind of like a suicide kind of thing. And so I remember not really knowing her very well, and then crying during the funeral. I was like, oh wow, is this what it's like when somebody dies? And like hearing the bagpipes play, and
Yeah.
it was during like basketball tryouts, and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about tryout, and it was like, whoa, so
Yeah. Yeah.
so sometimes what happens, and even with mental illness, right, or you go, well, I've never experienced depression, so I don't know what that's
Yeah.
like, and then it's kind of like uh yeah, it's grief is a challenge. And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
the reason why it is a challenge is because um at least in the Western, like American culture, which is what we were right, or we're in right now,
Yeah.
it could be true of other places. There's not really much of a we move at such a fast pace. It's part of the
Yeah.
like industrial world that we live in, where everything is just like, you got to go to work, you got to make money, you got to
Yeah.
save for your next vacation, blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
it's not so much about separating everything into like, okay, well, that's really good and that's really bad,
Yeah.
but when something happens like death and loss, scripture the scripture I think of is like Ecclesiastes 3, right, where it says
Mm-hmm.
that there's a time for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it says a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, right? So there's kind of this language of like a time to mourn, right? A time to
Yeah.
and even like Jesus crying when Lazarus dies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you're
Yeah.
like, wait, dude, why are you crying, man? Don't you know that he's about, like, don't you know all things, right? Aren't you
Yeah.
tapping into the God part of you where you'll know. He's like,
Yeah.
no, I'm crying, man. You know, and the shortest
Yeah.
verse in the Bible, right? Jesus wept, right? You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
what do you do? And what I've kind of heard people explain, you know, then there's the 7 stages of grief, you know, and I don't know. I don't know if that
Yeah.
helps people. Like, oh yeah, are you in these stages for the
Yeah.
rest of your life? Or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
anger is that like anger for like 6 months, or is this like anger for the next 20 years, you know?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so it
Yeah.
doesn't really help people if there's loss to say like, well, scripture says, oh, death, where's your sting? Right. And
Mhm.
Paul is saying that in context to the resurrection.
Yeah.
So that's good news. Like, you're going to see your brother again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and I struggled with that. Just because I was like, well, because I hadn't really had a huge relationship with
Mhm.
Daniel for the last like 3 or 4 years of his life. He did come up and he 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 got to because of COVID. Um, he was able to he got because all the stimulus checks and all that stuff, he was able to save up a lot of money. Um, and he was actually writing in journals. He was gonna be a nomad, bro. Like
Really? That's like
seriously,
just a
like
guy that travels around and
he was gonna be,
hitchhikes and
yeah,
lives with whatever or whatever.
yeah. He had it in journals, and I read it in his journals. Um, and he was like, "What's a nomad? What's community? Like what we're talking about now? Like what's community? I don't like that because I'm gonna be all alone. Like how am I gonna deal with this and all that stuff, you know?" And so
Right.
then he goes traveling, um, and he goes through California, and he goes up to Oregon. I think he goes up through Washington, and
Mhm.
he's traveling around and seeing these waterfalls and rivers and all this stuff. And so then he came down and visited us. He crashed on our couch
Okay.
for the night, and we had dinner. And
Yeah.
one thing I do regret is not taking pictures.
Right.
We didn't take any pictures while he was up, but even just having that memory. um and even then, I like we had a great memorial for him, um
Yeah.
down in Oceanside at my aunt's house.
Right.
um and it was good. um and it was good to see. It's hard to you're in that like space of like,
Yeah.
well, is it good, is it not? Like
Right.
we're there because Daniel's not there anymore, you know.
Mhm.
um but I had talked, and I wrote it in my notes, and it was just like me talking to him, like expressing my grief, in what I'm experiencing. And it was a lot of, Daniel, it's different now, because now when I think of like how you were doing, I can't just text you or call you like I did before,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And that was like the hardest thing that I could ever think of, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
even like now, like how oh, I can't text you, I can't call you, or I can't
Yeah.
even ask you like how are you doing, you know? But
Yeah.
I was struggling. It goes back to what I started to say, is that I started to struggle in my heart because I didn't really have a relationship with Daniel. um but like in his later years,
Right.
um you know. And so I didn't know where he was with the Lord, because we know that there is a hell and then there is heaven, and we're going to go there, you know. um Meaning like we're going to go in this conversation, you know, because what I struggled with is that I didn't know if Daniel actually like accepted the Lord in his life. And so I was really like, I was crying and grieving and like just crying, like very, very, very hard in like angst, because I didn't want Daniel not to be where he should be,
Yeah.
you know, where Jesus promises us that if we believe in him, that we would go and stay with him in heaven, you know?
Yeah.
But my dad had a couple of visions with Daniel in white, and he was in white with his hair slicked back, and he clean shaven, and he
Mm.
was smiling, and he was smiling towards my dad and saying like, and lipping like, it's gonna be okay, I'm okay, like I'm in a better place, you know.
Yeah.
I'm happy, like I'm happy, like this is awesome, you know.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know
And
that. Yeah. Saying I do believe there is a division. I do. That's my conviction. I might not be able to always articulate why that is. My
mm,
conviction is that it is real, and I think when people are proposing a different idea, um, I'm not like it's not like I've read every book on universalism or something, right? But
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
trying to read something recently, this fairly recent book by this Yale religious scholar, and I started reading it, and his kind of tone was very like, how could God do this? And I was just like, I probably should have just kept reading and like hoping that maybe that sort of tone would change into more
yeah,
kind of like here's my argument.
yeah,
And I kind of
yeah,
just gave up on it, and I was like, okay, man, I don't really want you to complain about God for like 50 pages.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? And
Yeah,
anyway, and so maybe
yeah.
that's a little like, should I give him the benefit of the doubt? It's like
Mm-hmm.
really, but yeah, what do you do? And so that's cool that you have a vision, and then um I think if we don't know, maybe that's just another thing to add on top of the feelings that you already feel of the
Yeah,
grief, right?
yeah,
It's like, okay,
yeah,
so now I'm
absolutely.
like, I already missed this person. And then
Yeah,
now I'm also thinking about like eternity.
yeah.
And it's like, wait a second, whoa, 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 this is a lot, man. This is a
Well,
lot. And but
it's
I yeah, like what do you do? I mean, so when you were saying that you were struggling with depression,
mm-hmm.
was that related to this? Or
Oh,
was it
yeah, I think
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, a lot of it,
What was
I
that like
just,
for you? What did that feel like? Because I'm always curious. It's one of
yeah,
those things that's like people know that depression's out there,
mm-hmm.
and then you read stuff and you read books about it, and then there's like these similarities where people are like, oh, you feel numb, you feel
Yeah,
hopeless, you might feel suicidal, you
yeah,
feel blah blah blah, but then it's so like it's hard to define. It's only
yeah,
really based on
yeah,
experiences that people have where you go,
mm-hmm.
okay, there's a lot of similarity. So what was that, what
Yeah.
was that for you? Was it sadness? Was it numbness?
I think both of those. I think a lot of it was numbness. Um, and it was hard because like it was hard and easy. I say easy is because my wife, Jannie, she she totally has had the grace for me over this whole trip, basically. Um this deal, with Daniel and even with life, but mostly with Daniel in this last year. It's it's been like, because she's been a CNA for 18, 19 years. So she's been in the hospital realm, in working in the hospital, but also taking care of patients. So
Right.
she's been in the realm of death and dying,
Yeah.
and people
Wow.
like
Interesting.
on their deathbeds,
Yeah.
in the rooms, holding their hands for the last time, just being that CNA, wanting to have someone be there for them, you
Right.
know, holding their hands in their last breath because their parents or their family wasn't around, or they didn't want their family around, but they wanted her around. Um, so she has been very gracious to me in like the grieving process is what I've learned and what she has taught me is that the grieving process is not a one fits all, you know. Um
Like
like
one size fits all
yeah,
sort of
exactly.
solution.
There's
Yeah.
no like, okay, if you're grieving, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you need to do that to like get over it or whatever, you know. Basically, it was like for me, it was like cry when you need to cry
Right.
and miss him and cry your and bawl your eyes out and miss him when you need to bawl your eyes out and miss him
Yeah.
because it's okay.
Right.
There's no right or wrong way to grieve. There's an unhealthy way, you know.
Well, yeah,
But
maybe
like,
turning to
yeah,
substances or addiction,
exactly.
which is
Yeah.
harder to do if that stuff
Yeah.
was there before the loss
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
happened. Like, oh, I drank before when I was
Yeah.
stressed. Now, and it kind of can be an excuse, even though the pain's real. Then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, now let's drink because we lost our buddy, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, it's the
Like that's
familiarity of what you did before, and you're like, oh, I know that feeling. So you go back to it, you know. Um, but yeah, it hasn't been like a every single day was different, and it still is different, you know.
yeah,
It's a huge roller coaster up and down and with different emotions. Sometimes I'm laughing and you know, thinking about him, and sometimes I'm bawling my eyes out because I miss him so much, you know.
yeah. I think of well, similar to it might be similar to like living in the past too much, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, people have said like you know, depression tends to maybe be focused on the past, right? Anxiety tends to be too
Yeah.
much in the future, and the thing that everybody is trying
Mm.
to master, right, is the present moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the challenge with the
Yeah.
present moment is the pain that comes with that,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, oh, if I'm really present when I'm trying to be present with you right now, and then it's like I could go all kinds of directions in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, let's talk about this, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when somebody
Yeah.
starts sharing something kind of vulnerable and hard, there's this person named Brene Brown. She's a big like not necessarily psychologist, but writer, and she talks about like vulnerability a lot and empathy.
Yeah.
It's quoted all the
Yeah.
time, right? And it's always like when people start sharing the grief, right, and then you're entering into the
Mm-hmm.
present moment with them in that moment,
Yeah.
and then you start to feel what they feel, which is called empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you start getting uncomfortable, and you're like, let's change the subject, man. Let's talk about something else, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm not talking
Yeah.
about like all day, every day
Yeah.
sit with people and like
Mm-hmm.
be sad with them. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
you can do that in certain stages of
Yeah.
things, but there
Yeah.
tends to be an impulse towards oh wow, that's uncomfortable and that's really hard, and oh, you're talking about grief, and you know, well, I don't relate to that, you know, and you kind of start putting up all these walls. And I do think the like the influence of scripture, kind of the life of Christ is, or even a better example is Paul, right? Who's kind of saying like suffering for the gospel in like a
Yeah. Yeah.
real kind of martyrdom way of like, you know, like literally getting persecuted and beat
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
And also writing like the Philippians thing of um, wow, I want to know Christ and the fellowship of his suffering. So he's not talking about suffering, just meaningless suffering,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't think he's saying suffering from um, what we could call sin. You know what I mean? Like the consequence of like rebellion, right? Or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about something that's probably a little bit of a mystery. And it's like, wow, how was Paul able to kind of tap into the fellowship of the sufferings, right? It's like, well, if I'm
Yeah.
going to know God,
Yeah.
then I'm going to know pain,
Yeah.
and I'm willing to actually sit in that. And that's going to take me to then sort of this other lens that he has, which is like glory to glory. And
Mhm.
And so it's like, what's the thing that motivates you to, if someone's lost 6 or 7 people in their life, it's like, what do you say? Are you going to go up to them and say, well, when you die, or whenever you die, I don't know when that's going to be, right? You're going to, be reunited with all of your people that you lost. It's like, does that really help that person? But
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
Paul could enter into that kind of thing without, so some of it with a lot of this stuff is, whenever you feel anxious, whenever you feel sad, whenever you feel grief, whenever you feel discomfort, what do you go to? Like, what do you go to? I mean, what did you go? And a lot of us, we do go to unhealthy things.
Yeah.
And that is where, I mean, I'm interested in learning about that, like addiction, because that's been my struggle, right? It's like, I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that the lust stuff and the sex and things, it's like, oh shoot, that's been a way that I've coped. And yeah, sometimes it's alcohol, and that's like, everybody
Yeah.
has a
Yeah.
thing. Maybe it's not a substance. So it's, I just, I
Yeah.
wanted to have you on the podcast because you're one of my
Yeah.
closest friends, but
Yeah.
also to kind of talk about grief and how to be present with yourself. Um, and here you are a year later, and it's like you kind of said, right? Some days it feels like it just happened like 24 hours ago,
Yeah.
and then the next day, but oh, I think I'm okay, or whatever. Maybe you
Yeah.
have these waves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to just, I guess, it's not even an interview, it's a conversation, like, just, hey,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm grieving, man. Like, well,
Yeah.
what about you guys? Like, well, I'm sure people listening will. So
Yeah.
what gives you hope, I guess, would be the question. Does that give you hope to know there's this kingdom coming to the earth, um or even the thing of being reunited with your brother?
Yeah. I think both,
Yeah.
all the above, um, a lot of the struggle that I've kind of fallen into was a state of numbness, like I said, the state of depression, but also like what you were talking about earlier is that like a lot of people kind of know what depression is, you know, but they go towards the most more of like, suicidal thoughts and all that stuff and like the very, very like negative stuff.
Or the
But
most extreme form
yeah,
of
the
kind of the
most extreme.
symptoms. Yeah.
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 And so I think it was maybe a month or 2 months ago that I first was like telling Jannie that like I think I think I was really in a depression, um because I didn't want to do anything. Like I just wanted, like it was the what was so weird was that I wasn't, like I didn't hear the news and then just go home and not doing anything, you know? Like I heard Daniel passed away.
Well, you probably
And
were in shock at first, right?
yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But it wasn't like I'm just going to be at home doing nothing. Like I have to provide still for my family. I still
Yeah.
have to work.
Yeah.
So going through that, I remember working at the tree service every single day. I would be breaking down like just by myself in the car with my glasses on, just thinking about him because it was so hard. Like I couldn't say anything, or I didn't feel like I couldn't say anything, or they couldn't encourage me. It just, when you're around and I don't know these guys, for my coworkers, I haven't known them more than probably 3 or 4 months, um, and they definitely aren't living in, like, they're not Christians, and so I think we were on a very weird level, um, of like, you can't really, thinking like you can't really encourage my heart, you can't really encourage me the way that I need you to encourage me. So
Right.
I was just kind of like honing it in and putting it to myself. Um, And I did a lot of crying with Jannie at home, but at the same time too, like I didn't know how I was grieving. I didn't know like what I was feeling. You know, it was really hard for me. Like, what am I feeling? I'm not feeling anything. A lot of the times when I feel like something that is just so devastating, I can't even feel. Like I go numb. Like we hear that word a lot tonight, is numb,
Yeah,
you know.
for sure.
And I can't even really explain like the numbness. Like the numbness is like, it just, it all wraps up in like different things. Like numb is right here, but it wraps up into here, and laziness and all that stuff. And it's just like, you just get to a point where you just don't want to do anything. But the hard thing is too, is that because you don't want to do anything, you still need to do something, because you have to work, you have to get,
Yeah,
you have
for sure.
to provide and get money, and you just can't live off of nothing, you
Right.
know. um and so all those like thoughts, and I remember like driving to work in the mornings, because I drove uh a couple of mornings in the morning by myself, um and I would be crying the whole way there, the whole way to work, because I'm just thinking about him. And that's the thing too, is I I have always learned to express, to allow those emotions, um by my dad's teachings, by my mom's teachings, of like teaching me how to live, and how to like, okay, if you're feeling this emotion, then like in a healthy way, like if you're angry, like don't just be angry and go hit someone, that's not
Right.
healthy.
Yeah,
But like if it's in a healthy like avenue or direction. um so it was like I was honing that, and also like, because I didn't have my mom and dad with me, because that's the people that I really wanted to like, to hug. And I have Jannie, but
yeah.
it's not the same with like your parents,
Yeah.
and so like, as much as I wanted them there, I had my heavenly Father that was really there to give me what I needed, and sustain me, and give me the joy, and like the groaning with me,
Yeah.
grieving with me. It's, the Bible says like he grieves with us, he mourns with us, he rejoices with us, you
Yeah.
know. um and so that was like a very like, when I was feeling those emotions and crying, I'm just like, I had a direction. It wasn't just like going up, up into smoke, just wherever, going anywhere. It
Yeah.
was going right to him.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very, definitely a game changer in this whole ordeal. It just, in me personally,
Yeah.
like in this whole ordeal, to give it to the Lord, and have him, like, what does he think about this? And it's still a journey. And and I think I'll never get over it. It'll get easier,
Mhm.
but like, it's even hard to say like it gets easier. you
Yeah.
know like, you don't want it to.
Well, yeah, that's maybe
you
the
know
expected answer to maybe make someone feel better.
yeah,
And I think we're learning in the space of healing and pain and trauma and mental
yeah,
illnesses, and
yeah,
some people don't like that word. So mental health challenges, right? To learn how to, I can't take away your pain, right?
mhm,
When I was suicidal every day for 9 months, right? And then I went through this again 2 years ago, and I've told these stories 1,000 times on here, right? The people closest to me, Sam and church friends, and I mean, so many people, right? My family, my mom, it's like none of those people were able to, get inside of my head and like change the suicidal thoughts to,
yeah,
uh, you know, okay. suicide's not an option, let me choose life, right? Like no one was able to really do that, right? And the only person that could do that was me, and by the power of God and the mystery of chemical whatever and medicine, all these things, right? It did change eventually, right? And so what we want to take people's pain away. Sometimes. I'm not saying all the time, but and that kind of comes in the form of not being dismissive, but like maybe giving people advice that's like, well, if I give them like the right advice, maybe that will take it away. So it's a good place to kind of come to an end here, where it's like, look, man, when I listen to stuff or I read things, there seems to be this growing need for community, right? For
absolutely
community. I mean, loneliness is such a huge thing, but also just being around the right people who would help you kind of work through the stuff, without kind of the religious-y answers or the thing of, trying to be perfect or whatever, all the pressure we put on ourselves to kind of, be a certain way, especially in church, and be like, no, man, I mean, most messages that I hear seem to kind of end with like, take a chance, take a risk. It's gonna like, especially coming out of the suicidal experience of like, I have to tell myself all the time, like, I want to live, right? Like sometimes that's the only thing I know how to really tell myself. But then it's like, well, what does that mean? So that's a good place to start. The first thing is just, look, man, I want to be here, That's a good place to start, and then build on that. Like, okay, well, why do you want to be here? Or what is in store for me if I stay here? And so you can't tell someone like, hey, you should live, and that means that now it's going to be easy. But having the thoughts towards the suicidal thing, or maybe you are overwhelmed with grief, the deception is like, oh, well, if you die, all the pain's going to go away. And it's like, well, there's still going to live, but it's going to be different, because what you're going to experience is like these moments of love, right, and hope. And then it's like, well, that's what it's all about, right? Is like, and you might not. And the tricky part is always the feeling, because sometimes, like what you're saying with the numbness, there's like a feeling about the feeling. Right. So the feeling is, I'm numb. And then now here's my response to, oh, I feel numb, so I'm gonna go numb myself. What I mean? And then it's like numb is like building on that, or and then it's all a mess. And it's like, oh, I'm not feeling anything. But like, it's just one of the mysteries of life. Like, we don't like to be uncomfortable for like a minute and a half. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I'm tired, I gotta go get coffee, or whatever, right? And so what I hear you saying is like, just try to like be present with your own self.
That's exactly.
Kind of scary,
Yeah.
So I always ask people this at the end, like, you're a man of God, you're a man of wisdom, and you're a brother to me. But for people listening who might feel like they're stuck in grief or hopeless, and maybe they are having suicidal thoughts, or just hopeless about, like, maybe they know they need help, but they don't know what to do. What advice do you give to like the person who's really, really struggling? And I know we've kind of made this also about our faith, right? So I'm not assuming that everyone listening is like Christian, even though I know that I have talked about a lot of that on here. I've also had people on who don't believe that. So it's not so much like we're trying to tell you to, go to church this Sunday, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, find something, man. You know what I mean? And maybe that's not the best advice. Like, shouldn't we tell people like, find God? And it's like, look, we maybe give Jesus a try. I don't know. You know what I mean? Maybe say it like that. Like, I don't, it's not so much about like you need to bow down on your knees in your room and like ask Jesus into your life, but like you maybe just say a prayer if you don't believe, you know, and see what happens. But like, what would you kind of say if somebody's kind of, because I know when I was struggling, I was listening to a lot of stuff, man, besides texting people like every day. I was like listening to books, and I was like, somebody's got to say something that will not necessarily snap me out of it, because it took a while to get out of it, but like you going to the next moment.
Well, I think like I don't want to say like the obvious answer, you know, but because I am a man of faith, is that like you find people that you can trust and really understand that there is a God that loves you so much, and he does love you even if, you know, it doesn't feel like it. But find someone that you can trust, that you can talk to. The grieving process is not a formula. Like, cry when you need to cry, and be angry when you need to be angry in a healthy way, you know.
Right.
The Bible says don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Why? Or be angry, don't sin, right?
Be angry, don't sin. And what's interesting about that is that it's okay to be angry. Just don't sin. You know. You know, be angry, it's okay.
Well,
you know?
feel the feels, and anger is a proper response to pain a lot, right?
And a lot of times is, you know, people don't understand, you know, sometimes they're sad, but that sadness comes out in anger. And then you realize, oh, the reason why you're angry right now is because you're actually sad. And I think when it comes down to it, is bringing it back full circle, is community, and learning that you need to talk about your situation. You need to talk to someone, because even talking and venting it out allows you to, it's like I see this picture of like this balloon, and this balloon is blown up so much, and that is your feelings and your emotions and everything. And it hurts because it's just all in this balloon and it's just not going anywhere. But once you start venting it out, and you start venting, like not just a metaphor, but actually venting the air out of the balloon gets smaller, and it gets compressed, and it gets into, you know, and so it releases like all that angst, all that anxiousness that you've had. And it's not just a go away thing. You know, every day is different, but find someone that you can trust, and know that, like what Jared was saying, is that like, we're not saying go on your knees tonight and pray and like you know, but if it is your night, go on your knees and pray, and allow God to actually come into your life and give that pain to him. He says his yoke is easy, his burden is light. For a reason, you know.
We're talking about, like, so
yeah,
it's fun, man. I know.
Yeah, man.
I'll have to probably do some editing, but all right, bro. Well, dude, I love you, man. We've been talking for like an hour and a half, so
yeah,
which is fine. I had no time limit on this. I just wanted to do a long episode with you, and you know, and yeah.
Can I show you a picture of my brother?
Yeah.
Okay. Here.
Oh,
that's Daniel.
Dude, you guys got kind of a similar smile.
Yeah.
Wow. That's sad. I'm sorry, man. I mean, I'm sorry that.
Yeah.
But thanks for sharing, dude, and thanks for.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on here.
Of course, man. All right, dude. I love you, man. All right, brother. All right. I
All
love
right.
you, man. We'll be in touch.
Love you, bro.
All
All right. Bye.
All right, guys. I will put all of Benji's info in the notes. He's doing some cool voice over work, and he gave me a little information on that. So you can type in Benji Davis VO artist in Google, and my voiceover platforms will pop up. And you can also find him on Facebook. I'll put that link in there. And I think when you do the pop-up, he has a Boldago account, Boldago, which is cool. So, hey, should hire Benji to do some voiceovers for this podcast, so you guys can hold me to that. And I told him that too. So, guys, referred to the end of show notes. I do have a new Instagram. I just decided to change my Instagram to Jared Deal, partly because of just some work, business reasons. The podcast is still going. I'll still post headliners and stuff on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I might talk about that later in an episode, but Instagram's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I am on Twitter, although I don't really use Twitter a lot. So refer to the end of show notes for links. I'd love it if you guys would leave me a review on Apple. I'll put that link in the notes as well. And special thanks again to Benji for being on the show. So glad we got to talk. Also, I will post this video on YouTube, and I'll probably put that link in the notes. And I'm thinking now that I can do that with other episodes too, because I'm using YouTube more recently. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.